In the darkness, nothing is off limits. Expand your perception of reality. Welcome to Blackout with Samantha, Scarlette, and Eddie Barella.
Hey guys, it's the June 2nd, 2017 edition of Blackout with Samantha, Scarlette, and Eddie Barella, and we have a jam-packed show today. We're going to be talking to music producer and musician Kerry Brown. He's worked with so many cool people, and he has so many cool stories to talk about, so I just can't wait to get into that interview. But before we get to Kerry, we have to talk. It's the first episode of the month. We've entered June. We're in Gemini right now on the astrological calendar. And we have to get Tamar Lilania on, who is our monthly, well, she's a tarot reader, but every month she comes on and gives us the monthly astrological forecast. So, Eddie, are you ready to have Tamar give us our June astrology?
I am. I'm a little worried. You know, I'm a Gemini, so...
Oh, you are?
I am. Hello, Tamar.
So that means you're... Wait, Eddie,
Hi,
that means like you've
guys.
got like kind of two sides.
Yeah, I am two-sided.
Well, Gemini gets a really bad rap because of this duality. I actually have Gemini moon and Gemini rising myself. But one good way to look at that duality is it encourages you to look at things from both sides. So everything has two sides. Every coin, every blessing has a curse, and every curse has a blessing.
Well, that's a nice way to put it.
Yeah, so and that's one of the themes for this month is that because we're still in the sun sign of Gemini, we will get some mixed messages. And for instance, one of the things that we have to look forward to is this weekend. June 3rd and 4th, lovely aspects, great days for relationships, romance, just being out with friends. It's a really good reward after some of the difficulties some of us may have had. However, the following week, we have June 9th. We have Jupiter going direct and a full moon. Now, both of these things can be positive. Jupiter's the bringer of luck. Full moons are powerful energy cycles where we can use that energy to help manifest, to help release things. Now, what we have with this full moon, though, is that it's part of what can be called an irritation triangle. So we have an aspect where we might see a crisis with a financial situation or relationship on this full moon. None of this is anything to be alarmed about. It's time for us to take that energy and use it for transformation. So we have this, we also have this aspect it's part of Ophiuchus, which you may have heard of, that 13th sign that was discovered, and that is represented by a snake or water bearer. So sometimes with snakes, we have a duality. We have a forked tongue. So basically, just be careful. Snakes are powerful symbols of life, death, and rebirth. So just take note of what happens on the full moon. Don't be overcome by it, but use it for transformation, because we do have a transformational new moon in Cancer coming up on June 24th. And what we have with that is, even though it's in Cancer, it still has a strong Gemini influence. Gemini is ruled by Mercury. This is about communication. And now we have what's called a learning triangle. So we want to take whatever happens with that full moon and learn from it with the new moon. Now, this new moon is it's a powerful, nurturing energy in Cancer. Cancer represents the mother, home, self-care. This is all about self-care and positive self-talk. So this month really is about transformation and healing, and anything negative that may come up with a full moon is there to be revealed to you so you can use it in part of your transformational healing journey. So that's what we have for Gemini for June. And do you guys have any questions?
If there was a night for this month, what would be the best night to go check out a concert, according to the astrology?
Actually, this weekend, June 3rd or 4th, would be the best night.
Okay.
I happen to be going to a concert
if
tomorrow.
there's any concerts. Okay.
Yeah, how about that?
Yeah,
with
this
some
weekend
friends.
would be the best. And again, at the end of the month, the new moon, June 24th, would be really good. I don't want you to be alarmed by what I've said about the full moon. It's just that we do have that irritation triangle, and it can cause some emotional outbursts, but those are happening for a reason, so that we can see with the full moon, it's about releasing the things that no longer work for us. So anything that comes up for you this full moon, it's there to reveal itself to you, about letting go of what no longer serves you.
Awesome. Well, everybody out there, take heed of Tamar's astrological advice. I mean, don't change your plans completely over them, but definitely you can use them as guides. So
yeah.
Thank you so much, Tamar.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. I look forward to next month.
Black Out with us. Follow the show on Twitter.
And we have Kerry Brown on the line. Hey, Kerry.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, good to talk to you. So, wow, there's a lot of stuff to talk to you about because you've done so much in the music industry. You've worked with so many bands. You've been in bands yourself. And then you have this really cool documentary that just came out in the last year called The Smart Studio Story that it has to do with all the iconic 90s rock music. And then you also just launched a festival called Starry Nights Festival, which we'll also talk about back in March.
Which was killer.
Yeah, it's very awesome.
Yeah, there's well, when you put it that way, I have to lay down. I'm tired.
Yeah. How do you have time for all
you've done
this?
so much. It's crazy. You've done more than a lot of people have. So I guess I'll start off
weird.
back
I
in
never
the
really
late.
think about it,
Yeah, well, you can't. You probably get overwhelmed. So back in the late '80s, you started out as a drummer for the band Catherine.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and then
Catherine was a band that was produced by Billy Corgan. I
is that how you first met Billy?
Chicago. What's that? Sorry.
Is that how you first met Billy? That he was recording with your band?
It's interesting how I first met Billy. I grew up in California, and I was sort of playing alternative rock music and what it was certainly a hair band city at the time. So you have to realize I was playing kind of like Echo and the Bunnymen meets The Cure. We were the only band in Southern California that sounded remotely like anything that was coming from overseas. And all the coolest music at the time, in my opinion, was coming from overseas, from Joy Division to Echo and the Bunnymen, The Cure. I was just kind of obsessed with what was happening, not in North America. And we formed a band called St. Vitus Band, which later turned into Children's Day. And we were playing music in LA and not getting, our friends would show up, but we certainly weren't the type of music that a label wanted to sign. They were looking for Guns N' Roses,
Yeah.
So I was like, man, I don't know if this music thing's for me. I mean, I love playing, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to sustain, pay the rent.
Is that because you didn't want to play music like Guns N' Roses? You were kind of wanting to...
Well, yeah, I mean, that was part of it. I mean, it's interesting because I was in a band with Slash for 3 weeks, probably.
Oh, wow.
Before Guns N' Roses, and he actually answered an ad in the Recycler, which all the bands would sort of advertise, influences and looking for a guitar player, and we got a reply from Slash. At the time, very young, living with his mom in Hollywood. We were in Orange County. Talked to him on the phone. Sounded really cool. And we drove to L.A., picked him up, drove him back to Orange County with his gear, and played, in a band for like 3 weeks. He then got a call from a management company saying, hey, we're putting this band together called Guns N' Roses, and I never saw him again. Cut to I see him on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
But meanwhile, you're making music that nobody's really...
That was kind of the last one. That was kind of like the one, like, you know what, I'm not going to be, because of my DNA, the way I play drums, the music that I love, I'm not going to be in Poison or LA Guns or Guns N' Roses. It's not going to happen.
Did you feel like you were doing something? Did you feel like you were doing something revolutionary, or were you just kind of doing your own thing?
We were so revolutionary that no one even came to see us play. That's how revolutionary we were. We definitely had a very, 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 very small following. Ahead of our time, I really think. It was just the type of music that we were inspired by. And you have to remember, this is pre-anything that had to do with, like, file sharing, pre-internet, pre-computers. So groups would get together and say, hey, check out this new Cure record. And we'd be like, oh, that's amazing. And we listen to it over and over again, stare at the album covers and like, wow, what amazing, Robert has such an amazing look. And this stuff was very magical in the 80s. And I lived in a garage with my band, and we'd like set up beds. We all kind of ran away from home, just down the street, really. Like this family that let us all like sleep in the garage, and we formed a band. And that band was like based on the music that we liked. And it just turns out that, you know, at that time, that was not the music that was vibrating in Southern California. So I got a little like, I'm getting older. What am I going to do? I'm an artist. I'm a visual artist. I know what I'll do. I'll go to Chicago. I'll go to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and I'll become a visual artist. I love it, and music will always be that thing. That was my thought, is that thing that I love, that my career will be visual arts. So I applied, get accepted to school, applied to Chicago in '86, the year the Bears won the Super Bowl. And Chicago was just the polar opposite of LA. Like, it was like a city of culture, music, food. It was actually a city, one location where people would gather, and they don't tear down, they renovate. And it was just a complete lifestyle change. And I was like, I fell in love with the Midwest, and I fell in love with city life. And I fell in love with the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, which is an amazing school and an amazing museum. So I was like, well, I'm never going to play music again, but I'm going to become a painter. And then, of course, 3 weeks pass, and I meet Billy Corgan walking down the street, and my life changes,
So you're just walking down the street, and there he is. And you're like, hey,
this is before the Smashing
you're going to be famous someday.
Kind of. There's actually more to this story, a lot more. Chicago, although it's a big city, it's actually a small town. I don't know if you've ever spent time there, but it's like Midwest, right? So they'll probably kill me for this, but so Gish had just kicked in, and the band was touring, and I joined Catherine. He had just finished producing the very first Catherine 7-inch for a little label out of Chicago called Limited Potential. And it was two guys, Neil and Jerome Brown, same last name as me, but no relation. And
I was wondering about that, because there's like three Browns in Catherine.
Yeah. When the Pumpkins started, they had a drum machine also, pre-Jimmy. And Billy produced the 7-inch. Goes on tour. When he's on the road, I joined Catherine. We had not met yet. And I started dating this girl, Yvonne, who was a singer in a band called Big Hat, which is another band that was just, if Big Hat came out today, they'd be huge. But they're just way ahead of their time. Couldn't quite get it right to get a record deal. Yvonne, beautiful singer. We started dating, and Yvonne's Billy's ex. They had a great relationship, but they broke up. Billy's ex. So we're talking. She's like, Billy Corgan. I'm like, it's so interesting. He produced the record that, of the band that I'm in now, but we actually didn't meet because that record was produced before I was in the band. And, he lives right across the street from where Yvonne and I live, literally right across the street.
Oh, that's funny.
Darcy, sister, lived 4 buildings down on the same street, and Jay-Z lives on the corner. So most of the Smashing Pumpkins were on the same street. And then I'm in the apartment with Yvonne, Billy's ex, and she's in this amazing band. Everyone was in a band, right? Chicago was there was a lot of music happening in Chicago. So
do you think maybe if you weren't
I know it's
living...
the long story to get there, but it's worth it, I think.
Okay.
So
go ahead.
I'm out in the street. I'm unloading something out of my car to bring up to the apartment, and I see Billy Corgan and James Yeehaw walking down the middle of the street with a bottle of champagne coming back from the very first Gish tour.
Oh, wow.
And I just look at him, and I'm like, hey, I'm Kerry. I'm in Catherine. He's like, oh, nice to meet you. Do you like video games? And I'm like, yeah, sure. He goes, I got the new whatever it was. It was like a hovercraft game. And he goes, you want to come play? And I'm like, sure. Go up to his apartment. 3 days later, a bum like comes knocking on the door. She's like, "Are you ever coming back? Are you ever coming back home?" Totally hit it off, and then kind of.
So you left your girlfriend for Billy, pretty much.
I kind of, yeah. I mean,
and then you later went on to actually marry Darcy.
Going on at the time.
It's that bald head. It gets everyone.
Yeah. It was when he had the hair. He
did have hair. Yeah.
Yeah, he had hair.
Sometimes
he had hair
we forget.
Until like 95.
That's right. The great recession of 95.
Oh yeah, I saw the hair come and go. So then it was like it seems like within minutes I was recording the band. I had a little recording studio. I dropped out of art school and joined the circus. My band got a record deal. Pumpkins became one of the biggest bands on the planet. At one point there was 2 years that I was on the road and without going home. It was a nutty time, but a great life experience.
At that time, were you at all jealous of the Pumpkins' success?
No. It was like we were like Catherine and the Pumpkins sort of had each other's back in a very competitive Chicago music scene. A lot of the other bands were sort of, I know, Steve Albini once wrote something like, Catherine and the Pumpkins are like Boston, which was supposed to be like the band Boston, which was supposed to be like some kind of diss, but, in a way we kind of were, We spent a lot of time in the studio. We spent a lot of time on our tones. I introduced Billy our band introduced Billy to the Big Muff. I mean, we toured together a lot. And then I ended up marrying Darcy. So it was just like crazy, We was like, the bands were almost like, we'd play together. I'd get up on stage and play drums sometimes. There was no jealousy, that's for sure. It was like, man, I can't believe this is happening.
Wasn't Billy the best man at your wedding?
Yes, he was. He was the best man in my wedding, and I was the best man in his wedding.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because that's a little known thing. People forget Billy was married for a very short period of time in the mid-90s. Yeah. And then you, with Catherine, you guys got to play some big things. Like you played the Reading Festival in England, and you guys opened for Garbage and the Lemonhead. So you guys had your own success. It's not like you weren't out there.
Oh, yeah, it was interesting with Catherine. And I think it goes back to my DNA and my earlier story about sort of being attracted to what was happening in Europe. We were on a pretty crappy label in North America called TBT Records. In fact, they're just horrible. They're just horrible. They screwed Nine Inch Nails. They screwed a bunch of bands. But we were signed to Sony in Germany. So it was really interesting for Catherine. We spent most of our time overseas touring, and we'd play, anywhere like Reading Fest or, little festivals in Germany. There were like 7,000-8,000 people, big, like almost like co-headliner slots. And then we come home and go on tour and play to, 75 people. It was really different. It was like almost hard. That part was hard to understand. Like, you go to Europe, you were like kind of big and happening, and then it was a lot of energy, and the record label was there, and you come home and you'd be like, oh. Then Courtney took us on tour the whole.
What do you think was
that's cool.
Oh, that is cool. Yeah. What do you think was going on? Do you think it was a record label misstep and not knowing how to market you guys in the U.S.?
Yeah. They didn't have records in the stores when we would show up in towns to play.
Wow.
They put no money into marketing. And it was crazy because, like, MTV was into us. 120 Minutes was into us. But they just didn't have, at that time, much different time than it is now. At that time, the record label had to have enough juice to get your album into all the stores. That was the only way you could sell music. There was no downloads. There was no streaming. There was no anything. It was just, that was it. You had to buy a CD or a vinyl, period. And they just didn't have the juice to get the records in all the stores. And radio was very important back then. Alternative radio was like key, and they didn't have the juice there either. To get a song on radio in the 90s, you had to put about 50, 75K into the radio campaign, and they just didn't have it,
Right. That's got to be very
frustrating. A lot of people think it just
frustrating.
sort of happens, like the music, the program director would just find a song and play it, but that's not the way it really works, So they just didn't have the machine needed.
So you guys
break a band.
are touring through most of the 90s, going overseas to big crowds, coming to the U.S., and not quite the same reception. And then we reach 1998.
Oh, not even close. I remember playing my birthday party in Albuquerque, New Mexico, to one person paid.
That's crazy.
I'm like, my birthday. And then to top it off, I'm allergic to chocolate, and the club owner felt so bad, he bought me a birthday cake, which was solid
chocolate. Oh my god!
So it was yin and yang for sure.
Well, what's
wait? No, taking it back. You mentioned you guys played with Hole. Like, what year was this? That must have been a crazy trip.
It was exactly it was within less than 3 months after Kurt died.
Oh wow!
So it was like right in the middle of a lot of chaos. But those shows were probably the most powerful North American shows we had. The energy at the time was just in alternative rock was. I mean, I can't even explain it to people if you weren't there. Like there's nothing in music happening right now that was like that type of energy in the early to mid 90s in alternative rock. So we're playing to packed houses that were just going crazy from the first note we played to our last song. And it's like the crowd didn't need to even know our songs. They wanted to be there. They were excited by the music. They were excited by the scene. They were excited about the community. And, it was misfits and freaks and music lovers all gathering. So when a band played with another band in the early 90s, it was like an endorsement. Like Courtney was like, I want you guys to hear this band, so the crowd would listen. Much different now,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, now it's like you kind of pay to play, or it's not like,
or the
everybody
label
skips the opening
out
act. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that is the, taking away the value of music and making music totally pretty much free. I mean, my kids grew up in a world where they just expect music to be accessible and free, and there's no real ownership in a genre anymore or scene, in my opinion.
So you think if music weren't free?
My kids, a good Katy Perry song and a good Nirvana song carry the same weight. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just the world they grow up in. There's no, when I grew up, it was just like you were punk rock, or you were ska, or you were like postmodern. I mean, it was like crazy, the genres, and you committed to those music scenes, and you dressed it, and you lived it, and you smelled it, and everything. You looked at it, and it was your life. It's not like that anymore.
And you think that's because music is free?
I think it's part of it. I think part of it is like by taking away the value of music without look, I had to make some decisions when I was growing up. It was like, do I want to go buy a pizza, or do I want to buy that new Cure record? And so it was like you would have to commit. You'd be like, I really want to hear that new Cure record. And the only way you were going to hear it is to buy it, because you knew they weren't going to play every song on the radio. You know what I mean? You had to own it. And then we started with like sort of swapping cassettes, and that would turn you on to music, but then you would go buy it. Once the music was free and shareable to everyone, once Napster kicked in, and people were like, hey, it's not any different than just making a cassette tape and sharing it. Well, yeah, it is. You're sharing it with, millions and millions and millions of people, right? And now they will not go buy that song because they have it, and they have every song on the album.
Because even back though when Napster came out, you still kind of had to work for it. Like, obviously you weren't paying for the music, but there was a chance you're gonna get a virus. It also took like forever to download it. But now, like even younger generation, it's not even like you have to like hope it's the correct song or search for it on there. Now you have Spotify and everything's there. It's legal, it's free, it's instant, no delay. So yeah, I definitely see where you're coming up. There's literally no value in it because it's just instant gratification.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, people don't. That was the first step. There was a documentary that came out in like 2013 called Downloaded. And I think Billy's in it, and Trent Reznor's in it, and Chris Blackwell. And it's sort of like what downloading music means. And this is pre-streaming when this film was made.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when Napster came out, you did have to go through the process of downloading a song and then storing it somewhere, right? Now, it seems to me, and I talk to a lot of people about this every day. Every day. I had this conversation 3 times today. Because there will be another wave, and it's going to be really interesting what that's going to be. But people do not even care. Most people, the average consumer, does not care to even own music anymore.
Well, there's also the vinyl revival going on right now.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? I mean, vinyl record sales have hit a 25-year high. So I think there are a lot of people out there who are hungry for actually owning a piece of music.
Yeah. True. I think, though, it's more that is more about the collectible than the actual experience of listening to music. Now, vinyl was the ultimate, in my opinion. I grew up with vinyl. There were no CDs when I'm old. So we would go buy the vinyl. You would open. You had to say, I'm going to spend the next hour of my life engaging with this artist. You got to open it up. You got to take out the platter. You got to put it on the turntable. You got to make sure the needle's clean. Set up. You would actually sit, get your position, and you would listen to the record. And then halfway through, you'd have to get up off your ass and flip it over. I mean, you were engaging with the music, and you would stare at the artwork, and you'd read every liner note, and Cameron Crowe's right up, or whatever it is, right?
And sometimes you would buy a record and you'd hate it the first time, but you paid for it, so you're like, I'm going to listen to this damn thing again because
until I love it.
Yeah, I just spent $13 on it. But what do you think the solution is? Is there a solution? Have you thought about, like, will there ever be another time where people are appreciating music in the same way again?
I don't know if it's going to be the same way. I'm constantly talking with people about how do we get fans to engage with music again, engage with the artists, you know. I don't know if it'll be the same way. You know, going back to the vinyl thing, I think people buy vinyl now as a collectible. They like the artwork, but I don't think they're really buying it necessarily to listen to music.
I listen to them.
There's some number that came out that was kind of crazy. At one point, I don't think it's anymore, but at one point, Urban Outfitters was the largest retailer of vinyl.
That's disgusting.
Store, right?
Yeah, I've heard that.
And it was like, it was interesting because they did a survey, and it was 70% of the people that bought the vinyl didn't own the turntable.
I'm guilty of that back like a couple years ago. I finally just bit the bullet at Christmas and got one.
I mean, I get it, though. It's just like it's a collectible. It's something awesome. It's like you can touch it, you know? Who the hell wants to look at a digital booklet on an artist, you know? Like, there's nothing there, you know?
But at the same time, but like if you think about it, though, I mean, back in the day when you'd actually have to buy a physical copy of a record, it was a little bit of a pain in the ass. But being, you know, a little bit older, it has to be cool for you to be able to just pick up a phone and have every single, you know, song ever available for you at any given time. Isn't that like your dream as a kid? Yeah, I mean, you know, it's interesting because I don't know. I mean, my kids will never know any other. They won't know the other world. Right.
You know, they grew up digital, so then their mind, it's always just been there. You know, I first saw the problem coming in when MySpace kind of blew up, and all of a sudden you're just like, oh my God, there's like 600 million bands. It's like they're like what? You know, it's like everywhere you look there was a band page, right? And I was just like, wow, what does this mean? Anyway, I think we get it. It's so, you know, by making the music free, there's no income really for the labels, which took away the bank that would support the artists to develop and find their sound.
Well, what about these record labels that are constantly saying that they're making record profits because of streaming?
Well, I mean, I know how that game works too. That game is majority of those artists that are making money off of streaming are because they're in, you know, on playlists. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, there's music lovers like us on the phone that will actually go on Spotify and we'll search an artist that we want to hear and play a record. But a majority of the users and Spotify friends of mine are going to kill me, just type in a playlist like mellow rock on a Friday night, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you're on those playlists, you're seeing royalties because your song's getting played over and over again in all these houses around the world, you know. But I don't know if it's the ultimate.
Well, it takes so much to make money, you know too, off of Spotify.
Yeah.
I think it's like 200,000 plays to make $1,000. So, I mean, that's not really that lucrative. Yeah. There's not that many people that are getting like 60 million listens or whatever. No,
I know. You know, I produced a Miley Cyrus song. That's got 28 million streams, you know, in less than a year. That song will make money, but it's Miley Cyrus, and it's just on the Miley Cyrus playlist. So if you type in Miley Cyrus, and you know that song will eventually play.
So it's interesting you bring up.
As a stream, you know?
Well, there's still room for pop artists like Miley Cyrus, though. Speaking of her, I mean, there are people still making a lot of money in music, but not as many as before. I mean,
well, there's no middle class anymore. I mean, it's just kind of like the world, really. It's not just music. It's like, look at America. So it's like there's like the 1%. And I'm lucky enough to actually work with a lot of them. You know, I'm partners with Linda Perry, who's an amazing songwriter. We are actually starting a label right now and a publishing company. And it's, you know, she's written some of the biggest pop songs in the world. But that's like the 1%. I mean, it's like the 1% or less. It's like 0.5%. There used to be this middle class of music that's where I see the suffering. That's where I don't where a record label would put. I mean, listen, to make money off streaming, you still have to market, or you have to know somebody to get on the playlist, or you have to go through some kind of system. Unless, I mean, there's the Chance the Rapper, and there's the occasional, like My Way, and just blow it up. But you know, for every Chance the Rapper, there's millions that didn't make it. So there's no support there for a lot of the music that we actually listen to, you know? Me, anyways, I don't know. I'm speaking. I kind of have an idea what Samantha listens to, so I think you know what I'm talking about. It's like, you know, I mean, I was at Coachella. My son wanted to go.
Oh, that's fun.
He really, so I took him. It was a hot, long weekend. But, you know, you got to realize that's a festival of I think this year, 125,000 people that all bought tickets before one act was announced. It was sold out before they announced a single performer. If you would have told me something like that would happen in the 90s, I would say you're on crack, you know? The whole thing is just different now.
Well, I kind of noticed it too with concerts.
Lifestyle. It was like, you know, selfie sticks, and music was in the bands. I mean, Radiohead was playing, but no one cared. They were taking their selfies, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think what's also interesting too, you see it with concerts. You either have a band that can play like 1,000-seat venue, or a band that's playing to a stadium. Like, there's not really much of a middle ground anymore with that. I mean, I think the last time I saw the Smashing Pumpkins was in 2014, and they played Webster Hall in New York City, which that's only a 1,500 or so seat venue. And then like you take another band that's, you know, from the same time period, like the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Well, they did 3 nights in a row at Madison Square Garden to about 60 to 70,000 people. And then like you have Metallica was just here in New York last week, and they played MetLife Stadium, which is 80,000. Now, if this was 20 years ago, I feel like the Smashing Pumpkins would have probably been at Madison Square Garden. But you don't really have that many shows where it's like one night only at Madison Square Garden anymore. It's kind of like they're either playing like a small intimate club, or it's like this huge stadium, and it's kind of weird.
Yeah. I mean, in the 90s, when it was the horrible incident where you know, Jonathan OD'd and died, and Jimmy kicked out of the band, I was in New York for that.
Oh, you were? Wow.
Incident, yeah. And that was at that point that was 2 nights at Madison Square Garden, and the Pumpkins set the record for the fastest sellout at Madison Square Garden. It was 2 nights in the 90s. But you know, there were a lot of bands that were at that same level from the same genre, you know. Mm-hmm. It was just a different time. I mean, just to think that there were shows like Chili Peppers headlining with Pumpkins and Pearl Jam opening.
That's so crazy.
That's just crazy, to think about it now. At the time, it just seemed like natural, and then all the tours for that were good. Now it's like festivals seem to be the only way that you can get a large amount of people into one place at the same time, and the bands can take a payday. If you look at most of the bands that play the festivals after the sort of top tier, a lot of those artists are not getting much to be playing their shows, not getting paid much, but it's their chance to break. It's sort of really the only chance to have anymore. But my concern with all of that is that most of the people there aren't there for music. They're there for the VIP hangout and the whatever the branding experience is going to be, and the selfies, and they're there for different reasons than.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like Coachella kind of appeals more to people wanting to put up on social media, hey, look, everybody, I wore my flower crown and my coolest festival attire at Coachella this weekend, and look how cool I am in VIP, rather than actually
It's not about the music at all.
No.
I mean, can you really enjoy the music when you're there in a crowd of 100,000? I don't know.
Yeah.
So we'll have more with Kerry Brown right after this break. We're going to play a song by Kerry's band Catherine that featured his ex-wife Darcy Wretzky from the Smashing Pumpkins. This is 4-Leaf Clover by Catherine.
Search Blackout with us on Facebook and Instagram. Back to Blackout with Samantha Scarlette and Eddie Barella.
I mean, you're in the forefront of the music industry, and it is kind of pretty easy to kind of look at it cynically these days. But do you see or foresee anything in the future happening where our culture might start to appreciate music again? Do you see anything like on the horizon?
And good music, not just music, but actually good music.
Maybe a band.
Everything now is kind of like,
What will it take? Will it take a band like Nirvana to come along, or will it take a technological shift, a cultural shift? What do you think will need to happen?
I think both. I mean, we have an opportunity right now as artists because of the idiot that's in, and sorry, but I don't know what your political views are, but the person that's the president of the United States of America right now is a great target for a new wave of punk rock.
How dare you, sir? How dare you?
Eddie's just joking. Eddie went to the Women's March.
So, I mean, there's a great opportunity there. Usually when there's a controversial figure in power, that is
people get fired up.
Yeah, that's good for art. And you can see when people hit the streets, I mean, we've never seen anything like this in our lifetime, maybe ever in America.
But he's about to be impeached, so we don't have a lot of time for this to happen.
Got to get on it.
Well, Ronald Reagan, I don't know, you should watch the Smart Studio doc. It was the whole discussion about Ronald Reagan. He was such a great target for punk rock,
True.
And it's something like what's happening in government right now could trigger a wave of real rebellion music, Maybe we've all been too comfortable. Maybe that's what's going on. Well, everybody's way too comfortable, and that's why, Coachella sells out without a single artist being announced. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like
once people can't afford Coachella,
we've been comfortable for a long time,
Yeah.
I mean, even the '90s rebellion was kind of rebelling against. If you look back at it, it's like rebelling against hairband. It's like that's not a huge rebellion. So I think with something like what's happening right now in America, there's an opportunity for visual artists and filmmakers and musicians and poets to really do something amazing. Now, if they take that opportunity and go with it, and someone gets behind it with some money and can help get through all the noise and distribute the art, that could be something spectacular. And that's when a tech company would come into play. It would have to be global distribution and not physical. Yeah.
No, I want to backtrack a bit when we were talking about the vinyls and that whole thing with the album sales. And you were kind of involved with this back in 2009. Billy Corgan kind of had a good idea where with the Tear Garden by Kaleidoscope album series, he released the music for free. You could just go on the Smashing Pumpkins website, you could download it for free. But if you wanted to buy it, you could buy these really, really cool, and I have all of them, vinyl sets that each one just was unique, and they came with little things. The one had an obelisk piece of thing out of a crystal or whatever. I mean, so it was really cool. It was something. What?
The box one?
Yeah. No, they were both very substantial. So I thought that was actually a kind of a cool and smart way of marketing music. You can get it for free, and if you like it and you care enough, you can get the really cool, substantial pack. But not every artist these days can afford to produce stuff that's expensive like that. I'm sure that's honestly, it's not that lucrative to do those VIP but special edition packs, which a lot of bands are resorting to when they're putting out a new album. I've noticed 30 Seconds to Mars, when they put out a new CD, they always have these very elaborate box sets, but they're expensive. So
yeah, the artist has to be motivated, right, to want to do something like that, and then there's the financial resources to do something like that. At that time, Billy he didn't have a record label, so he could do whatever he wanted to, and he had a big fan base. But that project was not, it's like a break even, But it was something cool for the people that wanted something collectible and not just a digital file. There is a real opportunity for artists to do really creative stuff and sell direct to fans. It's just there's still that equation where you have to have a solid enough fan base to begin with to market to.
Exactly. It works for an icon like Billy, but Not for a new band.
And you have to have the audience already. It's really hard to, because there's no record label right now to do anything like that. They just have the money. I mean, the deals that I see come across my desk, I can't even talk about. They're just so frickin' embarrassing and low for artists to sign to majors right now. And they're all in 360 deals. They want to own everything. It's earning money.
Well, what's the point of even signing then? At this point,
you can't, if you want to be famous or just have
there's a couple. Some people want it just makes them feel credible, right? It's like a major label signed me. There's that. Seriously, it's just like some artists feel that they still need that. The thing that's most important out of all of that is the marketing. It's the marketing and the distribution.
But they're not putting money into marketing anymore. I mean,
well, they're putting more than the average person could. Like, you can't on your own. You're not going to be able to finance it the way that a record label can. Even if it's on not what it was in like the 80s or the 90s, they still have more capital than like if you just like marketed your own band.
Yeah, I mean, they have radio teams, and there is so you get a team, but it's you believe me, if do not sign a record deal. That's all I can say with a major right now. But I can tell you that is what people do. You know, that is why people do.
But you don't see any benefit.
They're getting the sort of recognition of a major label, and that sort of pumps them up and makes them excited. But you know, it's that team. But that tour support money doesn't exist anymore. It's very little. They want a cut of all your merch. They want a cut of your touring. They want a cut of everything that you do, because that's the only way that they can make money back, because they're not making money off of streaming or any physical sales. There's not.
What do you think a band should do then instead of signing? Maybe I know. Why don't they pass out physical CDs in front of shows?
Yeah.
No, that's what I remember. A lot of bands used to do that. But
remember that? It's like my favorite is when someone would hand you one and then they're like would ask for $5.
That happens in New York City. There's like these rappers that stand on the street corners and they're like, "Oh, here's my CD. Yeah. Oh, that's going to cost you $5."
I know, exactly.
But really, what do you think bands should do? So, say a young band is approached by a record label and it's a major. You're saying don't take the deal right now if it's a shitty deal, a 360 deal.
It would have. There's a lot of variables, right? There's a lot of variables, but I think a majority of the deals that are out there right now are not legit. You know, they're just not. The bands will never recoup. The advances are so low. Unless you have a killer manager, they can get you like a licensing deal or just one record and out. You know, but they want to sign you. They want the rights to the next 7 records, and they'll hold you up. There's all kinds of crazy stuff.
Why do they have so much leverage? I mean, if they're offering nothing, where is all this leverage coming from?
It's coming from fear that there's no other place to go for an artist. You know.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I've heard rumors that I'm not going to name what artists, but I've heard rumors about these major pop stars who are the top ones, that they actually aren't wealthy like we think they are, and that they're just breaking even after the tours because of how expensive it is to hire the backup dancers and the costumes and the staging and all the crew. So it doesn't even seem like it's that lucrative, even if you make it all the way to the top.
They have to night manage at Denny's, most of them.
No, you got to get a clothing line going.
Yeah, no, that's where there's more money in that.
You know? It's not. I mean, you're right. I mean, it costs a lot to be on the road. A lot. You know, big productions are super expensive, and there's stuff that people don't think about. There's the insurance, and there's the all of the travel and the booking agents. And you got to remember that booking agents take 15 or 10%, and the manager will take anywhere between 15 and 20% gross right off the top, right? So then you got to pay all your performers and dancers, your insurance. End of the day, the artist is not taking home very much money. And they're not making any money off their record sales. In fact, they probably owe money to the record company.
Well, then you have things like tour buses that are $1,000 a night just to have one bus. Oh, yeah. And that's not even a great bus. That's an old bus that's breaking down. So, there's all these costs that people don't think about. And yeah. Now, speaking of big productions, you just launched the Starry Nights Festival back in March.
Yeah. That was pretty cool. This was in Santa Barbara. We had 2 nights. very diverse lineup. We had the Kills play, Dandy Warhols, Alan Parsons Project, Cat Power.
She Wants Revenge.
Yeah. Some really amazing up and coming acts that are from the Southern California area that were just, it was killer. We have another festival coming up in Joshua Tree, September. It's called Desert Stars Festival. It'll be its 10th anniversary. That's really small. They're microfests. So Starry Night's capacity is 3,000 people on 42 acres. It's an awesome community vibe, and it's really cool. Desert Stars is 900 people in Joshua Tree at a place called Pappy and Harriet's. We've had people like Dinosaur Jr. play that, and Sabado, Lemonheads. Some surprises that I can't announce yet coming up this September.
Cool.
That's it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. Trying to, and like now I can go back and say that's a place where it was cool to see a lot of artists set up their merch and sell to a community, but it was still, a few hundred people actually buying stuff. But yeah, I mean, we're trying everything we can to sort of, a shot in the arm of adrenaline to the music scene. And I think having a management company, a record label, production company, and then doing festivals, it's sort of like our friends are all jumping in and helping. And that part feels okay. That feels pretty cool. So hopefully we can break even enough to keep doing it. It's not, putting on festivals, it's insanely expensive. I mean, you guys saw that disaster that just happened.
Fire Festival.
Oh my
Right.
God. It's like, oh man. So, stuff adds up really fast when you throw on festivals and you get to security and insurance and all that stuff. But it looks good for year 2. We're starting to talk about dates and headliners. Pretty exciting. My team thinks I'm crazy, but it's fun.
And now you also have the Smart Studio Stories documentary that you produced that came out in the past year. And that's all about the Smart Studios in Madison, Wisconsin, which is where Butch Vig and Steve Marker and a couple other famous producers from like the 90s, 2000s time period recorded albums. And I mean, that's such an interesting story.
Yeah, that was 8 years in the making. And when Smart Studios closed, I mean, that is probably one of the coolest, in my opinion, recording studios that ever was. And, it was in Madison, Wisconsin. Butch Vig and Steve opened it many years ago, just to have an outlet, really record their own music and record local artists. And they realized early on they were pretty good at it. And they recorded a band called Killdozer from the area. And the Killdozer cassette ended up in Kurt Cobain's hand. And he's like, oh, man, this sounds amazing. Gave it to Jonathan at Sub Pop and said, I want Nirvana to sound like Killdozer, basically. Find out, where this came from. And it said Smart Studio on it. Sub Pop called up Butch and said, hey, there's this band called Nirvana. It was sort of happening at the same time as the Pumpkins were recording. Really interesting how those two bands overlapped and both worked with Butch at the same time and became so big. And Jonathan called up Butch and said, hey, there's this band on Sub Pop called Nirvana. I want to send you some demos. And I mean, the rest is kind of history. When they closed, 2000, I should know the date.
2010.
On the date, but
March 2010.
Yeah.
Thank you. Wendy decided to, who was one of the producers there and a filmmaker, decided to just sort of pick up a camera and interview people. And originally she was going to make a film about the last year at Smart, the closing of the studio, but it became something bigger. Butch was like, well, why don't you just see if you can interview everyone that recorded there and just see what we get. It's the way the film happened, really. And actually, Billy's interviewed in that film in my old living room. Grohl did an interview. Everyone did an interview for Butch. So when they started putting the footage together, like, hey, we have a real interesting, compelling story here, not only about the artist that recorded the studio, but about the do-it-yourself mentality of building a business, a real business. And then there's also the cool process in talking about recording studios, which a lot of people love. I certainly do. So when the film was getting close to completion, Butch called me up and said, hey, I think we're going to need some help just pushing this over the line. Because I do a lot of film and TV work. My wife is like one of the biggest film producers in the world. So we have a company. Butch called me up thinking, you help? I go, absolutely, I'd love to. So I came on later as a producer there for that film. After it was close to done. We did the final mixes in the studio and some parties, and we got to South by and Chicago and got a lot of recognition. And if you haven't had a chance to see it, you should check it out. It's pretty cool.
And it's available.
So where's that available?
It's available on iTunes right now, right?
iTunes?
Yeah.
Yeah, iTunes.
No, you mentioned that you're starting a record label with Linda Perry. Is there any other stuff, like cool projects in the horizon?
Well, I mean, the first thing that we're going to do is, I think, a really cool project is the soundtrack for a documentary called Served Like a Girl. And it's a documentary that was made by this director named Lisa Heslov. And it's about women veterans who come back after serving time in the military, and there's really no support for women vets. There's a lot of support. I mean, not saying that men vets have it easy. It's brutal. But there's a lot of support for men when they come back from service. But there's never really anything put into place for women. I think part of that's because women didn't really serve in the military until recently, and they just didn't figure it out. For whatever reason, 70% of the homeless women in Southern California are served in the military. It's horrible.
That's sad.
It's insane.
Yeah.
It's sad. So this film calls attention to that, talks about it, and there's a charity involved, and there's this nice sort of call to action. Linda is a producer on the film, and our label is going to put out the soundtrack, and the soundtrack's going to be amazing. A bunch of artists, huge artists that Linda's worked with over the years are going to let us put unreleased tracks that they did with Linda that were either demos or songwriting sessions that never made it onto a record for whatever reason. So that's our first soundtrack. That's our first project that's coming out on We Are Here Music, it's called, ATAR. And 100% of the proceeds will go to the charity. And
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a great cause.
Yeah. And it's an amazing film. I believe we're going to have a short theatrical run, and then the film will be available on Veterans Day.
And it already premiered at South by Southwest. A lot of good reviews already.
It did. It's winning film festivals, and went to South by and got 5 offers, and we're closing the deal right now with one of the offers, and now we're deep into the soundtrack.
Well, thanks for joining us, Kerry. It's been really interesting.
Thank you so much, Kerry. Yeah. It's been really cool talking to you.
Well, that was Kerry Brown, and what an interesting guest. Took up the whole show. Definitely. He was so interesting.
Yeah, I know, and I'm really bummed we didn't get to talk paranormal with him because I know he has some really cool stories. So we'll have to have him back some other time. I'm kind of excited. I can't say who, but we potentially have a really, really, really cool guest for this Friday that I think everybody will enjoy. But because it's not 100% yet, I don't want to say who it is. But if it pans out, you guys should know around Tuesday probably who it is.
Okay, and the best way to know that, of course, follow us on all of our social media. Blackout with us on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. Follow us and you'll know what we have coming up when we know.
Yeah, and even if it's not this specific person, either way, we're going to have an awesome guest next week, just like every week, because we only have awesome guests on our show. So, yeah.
Right. Well, we'll see everyone next time. Thanks for listening to Blackout, and we still need that alien abduction insurance, don't we?
Yes, I was going to mention that to you. You read my mind. Oh my God, you're psychic. I was literally going to mention that. We need idobi to get it, especially before Warped Tour. I want to be covered for if I'm out there watching CKY or New Year's Day or like, I don't know what else is on Warped Tour this year. But if I'm out there in the mosh pit and a UFO happens to do a flyover and they like send down their tractor beam and like pick me up, I need to be insured for that.
Yeah, I think so. This started out as a joke, but now I'm getting more and more worried about it.
Oh, I know. I mean, I feel like I've seen Men in Black lurking outside my house recently. I mean, we have so much on the show. You know, we have to worry about Men in Black. We, EJC, we used to have Satan as a frequent caller. I mean, like,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're really dancing the line here. We don't know what's going to happen.